Religion has been in the background for most of the series, but now religious themes come roaring to the forefront. The very first thing we see is Arya in the House of Black and White, gawking at all the various godheads in the temple.
This is a universe with many gods, but how many of them are real?
The faith of the Seven, which is dominant in most of Westeros but the North, teaches that there's one god with 7 aspects, which is much like the way the real-world Catholicism teaches the Holy Trinity. The 7 aspects are the Father, the Warrior, the Smith, the Mother, the Maiden, the Crone, and the Stranger.
You pray to the one that makes sense. Mother for mercy, Father for justice, Warrior for courage, and so on.
People don't pray to the Stranger much because he's the god of death, which people generally want to avoid.
But for all the faith that people have in this religion, we haven't seen any evidence that any of these gods are real. No miracles, no answered prayers, not even a lightning bolt to strike anyone down. Just a bunch of judgmental fundamentalists in tattered robes whipping the High Septon.
Very different story for R'hllor, the god from Essos brought over by red priests like Thoros of Myr and of course Melisandre of Ashai. We've seen all sorts of things that R'hllor worshippers can do. See the future in flames, give birth to murderous shadow babies, and most alarmingly, bring the dead back to life, as Thoros did with Beric Dondarrion in Season 3.
Its power seems to be growing much like Dany's dragons, and the icy evil rising beyond the wall. R'hllor's is a religion of duality, good versus evil, light versus dark, master versus slave. We know the others are real, so perhaps the fires of R'hllor will be the key to fighting them.
You know who else has crazy magic powers that are all tied up with their religious beliefs? The faceless men of Braavos, who can do cool stuff like change their faces, and from what we've seen of Jaqen H'ghar, they're basically the Batman.
They have a lot in common with the empty religion of the Seven. Their god wears many faces and has a singular aspect, but those faces are all the other gods of the realm, and it's not that those gods aren't real, it's just that they are all in the end the same thing: death.
There is only one God, and his name is Death.
You could argue that really has been the one true god of the show so far.
The only other gods we've seen who seem to have real power are the old gods of the North, the gods of the Starks. No one seems to know what these old gods are exactly, not even their worshippers, but they have a lot of power. Bran's visions are tied into the old gods, as are the powers of those flame-throwing children of the forest. And the old gods are the power behind the ability to warg into animals, of course. While the rest of Westeros converted to the Seven a long time ago, the North has always clung to the old gods.
Speaking of Northerners and their identity, in this episode, 3 of the Stark children struggled with how much to embrace their name, their family, and the vengeance they are owed.
Jon is struggling with his vows to leave behind his family, but his Stark heritage keeps calling back to him. Davos is arguing that he'll protect the realm better if he gives in to his desire to save Winterfell and avenge his family. But while tempted, Jon insists he can't be both a Stark and a brother of the Night's Watch.
Now, I'm not a learned man, but the best way to help the most people might not be sitting in a frozen castle at the edge of the world.
Arya also rejects her Starkness. To become a faceless man, she must give up her own identity, her own blood feuds, and become no one. She's finally rid of that lumpy brown tunic, and the Hound's silver, and her own iron coin. But the North remembers, and Arya keeps Needle, the most important symbol of her identity, tucked away for safekeeping.
Sansa is faced with the stickiest choice of all. Does she better serve her family's memory by staying the hell away from Winterfell and the people who killed her mother and brother? Or is she better off playing nice and waiting for the opportunity to take back the castle that has belonged to the Starks for 8,000 years? Can't blame her for taking the latter option, but the audience hasn't felt this sick with dread since Oberyn failed to kill Gregor Clegane as hastily as he should have.
For many people, religion and identity go hand in hand. What you believe is a key part of who you are. And in this world, whether your gods are the real ones will probably have a lot to do with whether you make it to the end of the story.
By the old gods and the new, House Slate will be back next week with another episode digging deeper into the world of Game of Thrones. He doesn't speak about her much, but it sure is interesting that he returned to Winterfell with 2 things: his sister's body and a newborn named Jon Snow he claimed was his son. Yeah, right, Ned.
So if Rhaegar was such a good guy,